Oh, looks like we're recording. Okay. Hey, everyone. Good morning. My name is Ketsia. I am part of the NetApp Customer Success Group. I am the Solutions Architect for OCI. Today I'll be joined by my colleague, Mr. Don Bork. Don, want to say hello?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
He's one of the technical program managers for the Customer Success Group as well. So we're going to be starting a new web series today. This is going to be focused on the different personas that touch OCI today. In today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on the IT administrator. All right, so Don, let's move on to the agenda. We just want to quickly showcase what we'll be talking about today. So, when we're looking at OCI, there are different parts that make up the product. You have the operational UI, you have the data warehouse that builds out the reports that your executives or managers may be accustomed to seeing. We wanted to showcase how you can leverage OCI in your day-to-day operations. And then from there, we'll talk about how we would see a customer do their natural day-to-days, looking at maybe one of their ticketing systems. We're going to be focusing, in this case, on ServiceNow and how you can start from ServiceNow's incident management and walk your way through into OCI, and then we'll do this in a live demo. And then from there, we'll talk about other pieces that may be applicable to you if you haven't touched OCI in 7.3.1 or 2. Anything else you want to add, Don?
No, there's a good point to talk about this a little bit. You mentioned ServiceNow, right? But we're not limited to ServiceNow. It's basically your business ecosystem. So how can we pull data into OCI or push that into other ticketing systems, incident management, automation tools, orchestration, and so forth. So the example we'll show today is with ServiceNow, but just note that we're not just limited there.
All right, thanks, Don. And we'll also talk about additional resources and what we plan on doing for other webinars that are part of this web series as well at the end. If you do have any questions, feel free to post it in chat. I'll be monitoring chat periodically. I'll also be putting in a chat as well so that you're also aware that you can post it there. If it makes sense, I'll ask the question live on the webinar, and we'll address the question there and then. Otherwise, if we don't have any time left over after the webinar is done, we'll post the question in an email and send out to everybody what the question was as well as the answers.
Perfect. So one thing to note here as well, very similar to how you work in your day-to-day, both Ketsia and I are remotely or geographically distant from each other. So we're working to get together today in the tool, in different locations. So, and this is, I think, a valid point for what we're talking about today. And I would say the emergence of hybrid cloud and what OCI brings to that value. So, first, I want to talk a little bit about connecting the pieces, right, and the challenges that we meet, that you have as an IT administrator meeting the demands of the business. This could be both with hybrid IT, where you have resources in various locations, whether it be the public, private, or even multi-cloud environments. And then moving, I'd say, a little bit deeper into the tool sets. So what tools do we begin to use to be able to isolate and identify those problems? I think one of the key challenges that I see often with our IT administrators is the disparity between the tools. So all these siloed tools between different vendors, maybe even different groups, right? The network team, the storage team, the virtualization team, they're all using different tools. So where do we begin? And I think really that's where OCI brings a unique value of being able to cover that entire landscape, really boiling down the ocean or finding the needle in the haystack and at least pointing you in the right direction to begin troubleshooting.
Now, so let's talk about that a little bit more.
Sure.
Today, without OCI, how would ticketing work today? If you think about it, you have all these different vendor-centric tools, all the device managers that could potentially create violations that would be sent into a centralized incident management or ticketing system. But then as you're getting those tickets, you're only getting the violations for that particular device. So let's say I had a ticket that showed latency for a particular server. It may not be a server issue. It may actually be a storage issue. But as you're traversing down to find out what the root cause is, you could be looking at multiple tools, and that may, as a result, having you talk to other teams, and that could delay the actual SLAs and SLOs that you may be providing back to your business.
So, Ketsia, you know, in my experience, what I found often is the storage is always the first one to be blamed, right? So a lot of finger pointing happens with the storage team. Everything pretty much flows from the bottom up, and that's where we're getting our services from. So, you know, they would point to the storage, and then it was up to the storage team to basically prove their innocence. And, you know, that could take, you know, in the case of, let's take NetApp, it may require running perf stats. So perf stats, for folks on the phone who may not have run them before, can take anywhere between 24 and 48 hours to receive the analysis back. So you have to enable the perf stats. Hopefully you capture the problem during the time of that collection. And this is not specifically just NetApp. EMC has the same, I would say, philosophy where they enable stats logging for their EMC arrays. And you hopefully capture that situation or that trouble point, and then you begin your analyzing of the problem. The problem there with this approach is that you're delaying the other groups if you've found to be innocent, meaning if there isn't a storage problem, you just delayed those other teams 24 to 48 hours before they can actually go and resolve the problem. So that's one problem with disparate tools and the vendor-centric tools when it comes to collecting performance. So I'll turn it back over to you, Katz.
But at the same time, even if we did prove the innocence of these storage teams, we're always being in a reactive state. What we also want to showcase later on is how you can actually be more proactive, leveraging OCI's actual tools. And then from there, what we got also talk about is how do you automate this as well. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, so one thing that I mentioned about hopefully capturing the problem, OCI is always on, always monitoring 24/7, and you can really see when it comes to the I would say proactive or even prescriptive portions of troubleshooting and managing those incidents, you can see that wayward or that uptick in utilizations or latencies versus just point-in-time measurements. So really, you know, that's where we're using OCIs. We can see those emerging trends, those ebbs and flows or peaks and valleys in performance or capacities, and better be able to manage the environment. Okay, so let me move on to the next one here. There we go. So I think this, Kat, is where I want to spend most of our time is actually going through the live environments. I don't want to bore the audience with PowerPoint presentations. Mm-hmm. So I'll jump into our ServiceNow incident ticketing system here that we have.
Yep, and like Don mentioned before, it doesn't have to necessarily be ServiceNow. We just have ServiceNow set up so that we can showcase how the flow works. But again, it could be BMC Remedy, it could be Cherwell, depending on what you are using for your ticketing system.
And of course, it's always very secure, so got to sign in here. So here we are in our ServiceNow portal, and it's loading here, so bear with us. And what I want to do first is go look at our incidents. And again, this is a reactive mode. We're getting notifications. Maybe we got an email. We have to go in here and check out our incidents. So I'm going to go to the service desk portion. And apologies, it's running a little slow there today. Not quite woken up.
Yeah, put INC.
There we go.
There you go.
All right, so here we are. We have all of our incidents in here, and we can see that we actually received one incident here. It's deemed critical, right? So there's some urgency behind this, and there's a number of ways I would say, classify this critical alert. This happens to be impacting one of our production VMs here. We're seeing some, I would say, rather high latencies on here, and it's actually exceeded one of our SLAs or SLOs. Now, this information is flowing from OCI into the ServiceNow ticketing system or incident management system, and I'm just going to click on this incident number, kind of walk you through how this looks and the details that we're capturing. So what we have here is we have the categorization of the incident. So this is actually an inquiry or help. Someone's seeing some slowness on this particular server. Right at this moment, I don't actually know what they're doing with this, but we have the details captured below. Now I can also look at the topography or the dependency mappings that ServiceNow provides in their incident management. So I'm going to click on this. It'll open up a new view for us here. And you can see here we have the actual Linux server here, and we have the storage servers below. And so a small topology here. And I can actually hover over the incident icon here, and we can see that we have an incident for this. And again, the latency concern, right? Greater than 50 milliseconds of latency. Now I can also drill into the incident ticket here and view the form. So I'm going to go in here and look at the form here. And this is basically your first line of triage. So this is what you're seeing. And what we know is we have a VM in trouble. We have latency that we're seeing on this VM, but we really don't know why. Is it, do we need to increase memory? Do we need to increase CPU? Is it an I/O or storage or a back-end problem? What I'm showing you here is the URL for OCI. So I'll turn it over to you, Kat. I know you like this part.
Yes, so think about it before this integration that we're doing with OCI into ServiceNow. What you may start off with was just taking that host name and going into your device manager. So in this case, it could be VMware, since this is a VM. We could be looking at the performance logs or looking at the trends of the CPU memory as well as latency to see what that VM is doing. But then where do we go thereafter if it's not a server issue? What we want to showcase here with this URL is that we have a link and launch into OCI so that we can start doing our troubleshooting process. And that's what Don's going to walk us through right now.
Exactly. And here at NetApp, we actually use OCI and ServiceNow as well. So you're seeing an example here. And as an application owner, I actually get access to this URL. And one of the beautiful things here is when I suspect that there's some slowness or latency, or maybe I'm doing some development, I don't need to really, wonder why that is. I can actually click on the URL here, which I'm about to do in a moment, and begin to investigate. And I'll tell you just a quick little story that I find kind of amusing. One of my colleagues every single day got a call from the very same person, always complaining about slowness on the VM. This was almost a daily routine for this individual. They educated them on OCI, how they can use this URL, and mysteriously, the complaints started to go away, to the point where they actually thought maybe the person moved on to another company or retired even. And what they found out by looking at the OCI audit logs is that the individual is actually logging into the tool and investigating and using it for basically their release management and testing and verification for their new developments. So, just another little use case, but practical. And, what it was stopping was the tickets from actually being opened up in the first place. So what I'm going to do is jump in here, and this is going to log us into OCI. So I'm going to jump into this now. Just log myself in. There we go. And this is what the user would see in the ServiceNow portal. So they can actually go and begin to identify remediation efforts or steps. So here we are. We landed on the virtual machine landing page. This is the virtual machine that actually had the latency that was reported in ServiceNow. You can see this, it's indicated by a red dot. So we're seeing about 66 milliseconds of average latency. We really have some high peaks here, around 204 milliseconds. And we're getting other various capacity and performance metrics here at this roll-up or summary screen. You can also see the policies that were enacted that were violated. So these are our SLAs or SLOs. For this particular VM, you can see that we passed one of our warning statements here, our policies of 20 milliseconds, and we actually exceeded a critical warning for this. And again, this is mission, this is production environment, so we want to make sure that we're maintaining those SLAs. But now we need to move into how do we return this service back to the business? How do we quickly remediate this, find or determine the root cause? And that's what I'm going to show you is how we use this, how we interpret some of this data. So hopefully this is a little bit more in-depth for you as an IT administrator. We can also see up in the upper right-hand corner our end-to-end topology. So we see the VM, the host that's associated with it. It's actually NAS-attached storage and the back-end storage array here. If I click on any one of these icons, I can actually dive right into those resources. I also see that it's associated with this ECM internal application. If I click on this, I'll actually dive to the application landing page, which I'll show you in a moment, but for interest, we'll stay here on this page for the moment. I also get some hypervisor details, the name, the IP, the OS, memory, and CPU utilization numbers. Below
so Don,
this,
I can see the alerts or violations that are being triggered based on latency, but right next to it, I also see that resources page, and I see a top correlated. What does that mean?
So that's a good question. So let me do this, Ketsi. I'm going to drill down to the 3-hour time frame, just make it a little smaller so we can see. And what you'll notice on the correlation is the correlations are going to change. These are dynamically created based on the hour or the times that you're viewing. So the top correlated resources are the resources that are most closely correlated in the service path for this virtual machine. So these are the logical or physical constructs that are attached to this VM. Below this, you'll actually see we've identified what we call greedy resources. These are your top talkers, your I would say your bullies in your environment, right? So the noisy neighbors in the environment. These are all terms that people throw around, but essentially what they are the most demanding assets in this circle or this service path. So these VMs, if within just one click, you saw I just landed on this page, I can actually go and start to understand why these are impacting. What we provide on the right-hand side is our correlation analysis. And what you can see is they're ranked. So 92% for this particular, when you hover over the icon, it will tell you what that is. So this is an internal volume or flex vol for us NetApp folks. And then below this, we have a host that is 53% correlated. Obviously, the 92%, higher amount of correlation, more impact. Below here are our greedy resources, like I said. When I click on the particular correlation, it will actually give us an analysis. So you can see the IOPS, and this is how you read it, and this is a little bit of confusion I see. Some people just don't quite follow how you should be looking at this correlation. So it's telling me that the IOPS of this particular VM is impacting the latency of the IOPS of this VM is impacting the latency of the other, meaning it's greedy, right? It's asking for a lot of I/O or demanding a lot of I/O, therefore causing some pain on this other VM. Now, you can jump quickly to this, or you can go through the details, which I'll walk you through. Okay.
So I can see that we can go two different ways. I can see that we can go and take a look at the greedy resources. I can also see that we can also take a look at from the storage side as well. What do you typically recommend we start off with?
So, when I do this, first I'm looking at the summary page here at the bottom, right? We have additional details around here. If it was fiber channel, you'll have masking and mapping details and so forth. So I see all of the constructs there. I like to start off at the application and understand there. That's where I usually go. So I'm looking at application alerts that I'm receiving. In this particular case, I would personally go right to the greedy and understand why these are. But I also know with any analysis, I've had a background in performance analytics solutions for years, I need to be able to provide the facts to my team and prove or justify what I'm saying. That's what this correlation here at the top is going to do. It's going to help you build those facts. You want to get to the answer fast, jump to the greedy here, and you'll get your information. You need to build the details, go through the steps here. I select the top one here. What you're seeing is it's actually overlaying the performance, so I can see the IOPS are very closely correlated to the latencies that I'm seeing in the above chart. What I would do next is actually look at this analysis here, and this is how you would read it. The IOPS on this particular VM is 92% correlated to the IOPS being felt or being driven on this particular internal volume or flex vol. Right? So next step, dive into the flex vol. Let's take a look at that. And as we walk through some of this stuff, I'll also try to call out some of the new features in the latest releases. We are using the latest release that came out on March 1st. Okay, so here we can see we have our high-level details about the internal volume or flex vol. We can see some efficiency information, the deduplication, bin provisioning, etc. We see that this is actually aligned to a different application. We started off with ECM. This happens to be a file or admin host application of some sort. And we can also see a tier that's associated with it, which is high write. Now, I can do a couple of things down here. I can come down to my performance timelines. Right now we're looking at total IOPS, But I can do this. I can duplicate this graph, and I'm going to duplicate it once more. Okay, and just raise this up so you can see it. So right now I'm looking at total. I'm going to switch this over to read, and then the bottom one I'm going to switch over to write. And sure enough, the majority of my workload here is write IOPS, right, my write activity. So I can understand that. I can see where the activity is coming from. Now on the right-hand side, we have a new correlation analysis here. So what we're looking at is a storage pool or an aggregate for NetApp folks. And we can see that that is 91% correlated. When I select this, it's telling me that the latency in the IOPS on this particular volume or internal volume is very highly correlated to the amount of utilization being felt on this particular storage pool. What does that mean, Ketsia? What are we trying to say here?
It looks like what we're trying to say is that this particular volume is driving most of the workload on that particular storage pool. It also makes kind of sense if you see under the degraded there that this particular volume is impacting another resource that's probably sitting on the same aggregate here. So I guess in what you're trying to showcase here is that we may want to take a look at what's happening at the aggregate, correct? And see what's going on for that particular level.
Absolutely. Now we can do that here. Again, we can overlay the metrics on top of here. So we can look at the IOPS and we can look at the utilizations for that particular aggregate. We can also look at the controller here. So let me just remove some of these IOPS screens here. So I'm going to just pop a couple of these off. There we go. And we can also look at the storage nodes. So let's take a look at that. That is also highly correlated. And what we see here is that our storage node utilizations are actually exceeding 50%. And in an HA peer environment with cluster data ONTAP, we always try to keep it around or below 50% in case of a failover. We don't want to see any kind of increased latencies. So our best practice is really to keep our measurements below that. Now, one thing that people often, I would say, neglect to use here is the additional resource section. So what is this for? This is so I can bring non-correlated items into the mix, so I can view them together. So what I would do here is if I said, okay, I understand the storage pool utilization is high, the node utilization is high on this particular cluster, I'm seeing basically the overload of this, and I need to potentially move some workloads around, or maybe even add some more cache to this controller. What I can use this additional resource for is to actually search out for areas of additional headroom. And you wanted to say something, Kat?
Yeah, so in this case here, I guess what you want to first do is take a look at who is driving those most workloads, right? We saw what was being impacted. We started off with that VM that had that violation, but there's certain other resources that are impacting the I/O that's driving on that particular volume that it sits on. So in this case here, we know that that volume is driving most of the workload on this particular node, which means, yeah, we probably do want to move some of the applications away. We did see some different application names, and that's probably where we now start off first, correct?
That is correct. That is correct. So one thing, before I jump there, I want to show you how I would find another area. If maybe it was I wanted to remediate this and just simply move this, I can start typing the resource name that I have here, and what you'll see is it'll start bringing in resources that have something with the word node in it. If I want to target this down to a specific node, then I could type in node and then give it a name like this, and you'll see that now it's actually more precise. So what I'm going to do is just simply click this here. It's going to bring this storage node in here, and you can see, yeah, maybe this is the storage node that I want to move it to. It's much less utilized. I don't see those spikes at those same times of day, right? Maybe this is a better alternative. And again, if this was a heterogeneous environment where I had a mix of different storage vendors, I can also bring that storage vendor in here, such as Dell EMC or Pure, type that into the additional resources, and I can see the resource demand for that particular object. So just another way to do it. So I'm going to jump over here into the storage pool here just to kind of prove these facts out. And we're going to look at the storage pool here. Again, we're looking at the last 3 hours. You can see here the capacity and high-level details about that storage pool. And now we have a number of different resources here in this storage pool that are correlated. And they're all correlated, but you can see I would say the top one here is the storage node itself. So we are seeing some contention here. Here is a list of all the storage volumes or internal volumes here, and it looks like we have about 365 of these in here. This is a new feature. I know here at NetApp, one of the challenges we have is we have very, very long volume names. And I'm talking 100 characters probably on some of these. And with any UI, unless you have one of these enormous screens, you may see some truncation or ellipsing of the actual volume name, which can cause you some challenges. You can see here in the center here, it's putting the ... What we've had in 7.3.2 is the ability to actually come over here and copy this name to the clipboard. So I basically copy that, and then I can come over and enter this into a search, maybe the global search at the top, or basically putting it into the additional resources. So another little feature. I know it helps me out. I don't use Post-its anymore. It's really simple to do for me now, and it's to get away from the ellipses that you see in the long volume names. If you hover over the name, chances are you'll get it, but even still there with the hoverovers, there is some restrictions on just simply how many characters we can put or visualize across the screen. Okay, so Ket, did you want to talk about this for a moment?
Yeah, so I noticed that we have a really high correlation with that node, and we saw earlier that we are hitting that 50% threshold. Any chance you could actually take a look at that node so that we can see if there's other things that we want to be concerned about?
Absolutely. So what we're looking at here is we're just going to bring in all the metrics. We may not have them all here at this moment, but we'll bring them in here. And you can see here that it's pretty much flat lines. These are our relatively new workloads for us here, so capacity really hasn't gone up. One thing that I see often is that proper capacity planning is often the result of what we're seeing for issues out there, or improper capacity planning. So basically understanding when I'm seeing I would say overutilizations of the aggregate, or hitting 85, 90% of capacity used for my aggregate, it's going to cause other things like defragmentation and so forth, and then I start seeing those latencies increase. This is probably not the case because of it's relatively a new environment for us here. So in this particular case, I would probably recommend moving this over, or just vMotioning some of these VMs over to the other storage controller. Okay. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to jump back to our original statement here. Again, OCI saves all of this information in the browser history, so you can simply go back and toggle through. There we go. So here I am back here. I want to take a little bit more of a proactive approach here, Ket. So this is how I could quickly find the issue, right? So reducing that mean time to resolution, getting the root cause quickly. I understand what I need to do, but how could we have been a little bit more proactive with this and saw this kind of coming, right? And kind of put the fire out before the ticket actually happens. One way is with anomaly
because what we were showcasing
right?
was what we were considering a critical violation. We want to showcase maybe alerts that help us reduce the amount of noise before it actually becomes an impact for the rest of the business. The violation that we saw earlier was a latency, and that's only there after the fact. What we could probably do is take a look at some other different metrics, maybe CPU utilization or memory utilization or even IOPS. And that's what Don's going to be showcasing us here. Now, this is actually a pretty great landing page to actually showcase. What we're showing here is the anomalies as well as the full end-to-end for the application. So not only are we looking at that particular object that was being impacted, but all of the objects that are associated with the application stack. Did you want to take this further, Don?
Yeah, so, this is, at a high level, this is our anomaly detection capability, or what we call ADE. It's our machine learning in the product. And basically what it's doing is going out and learning the normal or the expected behaviors of these particular resources, whether it's the compute resources, the hypervisors, the storage nodes. And it's looking at a number of different aspects of that, whether it be utilization, IOPS, latencies. It could also be traffic or even buffer-to-buffer credits in fiber channel environments. We're looking at all of these factors and basically creating a line and saying this is what we expect based on its normal behavior. And this changes over time. So when we first see an application, everything's pretty much abnormal to us. As we learn and we go forward, we start to actually see that this is somewhat normal behavior. And then we'll trigger when that deviation goes much or significant above what we expect to be normal. So here you can see, as Ketsia mentioned, we actually gave it a score. Now in 732, we can actually receive alerts for these anomaly scores. And often what I see, this could be days or hours at least before the actual incident occurs. So we start to see the uptick in IOPS, or in this case, latencies that we were feeling on the VMs. We can see these here, right? We see these little upticks on the application landing page. We also trigger, or we score the objects here. So you can see the number of bars that we see. And again, as Ketsia mentioned, this is the infrastructure that's supporting the application. So you got 38 compute resources or virtual machines, hypervisors. We've got about 14 storage nodes. 66 flex balls in here and 20 different storage pools. It can be rather difficult for you to jump into these tools. And again, these could be across different storage devices. You may have multiple different storage arrays serving up storage to this particular application, which when we talked about the disparate tools, that's where OCI's value is. We're bringing you this all, rolling it up, and then showing you in this view. When I click this, I actually see that we're seeing the latency significance here, right? So this is something we don't deem normal here. It's not necessarily triggering a threshold. You can see the latencies here. We're actually still pretty low, but it's abnormal for this application. So I would have never got an alert from this from any toolkit, right? But we do know the impact that we were feeling, and the incident actually got generated in ServiceNow. Okay.
So we actually take this two different ways. Well, what Don can actually do is actually chart that into the existing graphs below, or he can actually just drill down into that particular object and see what is the resource that could potentially be impacting that latency there. But let's take a look at that, Don.
There we go.
So we can see here that the latency is relatively high. It's at 63 milliseconds. We see that there's also a peak, but what I also noticed, Don, that there's actually no violation that's associated with it, even though it is a pretty relatively high violation or latency.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Why is that? Well, we had latency alerts configured on the virtual machine in this particular environment, but nothing for the storage. Right? Maybe the virtualization team is the one that set this up, but we're not receiving any alerts. I think it makes good sense to show them how we could do this so we can get alerts on the storage backend and take a look at it, and it's actually relatively easy. So here I'm going to go into the Manage Performance Policies, and you'll see here that we have this little Add button here. We can also see all the policies that we have currently configured this environment. We have some port policies.
We have mostly virtual machine policies, right? We don't have anything really associated around the storage side.
Right, and this is common what I see. And, with the policies, we can set these for exception-based rules or global. So I'm going to show you a couple of different ways here. So I'm just going to create one, call it internal volume latency. Okay. And now we're simply going to select the object type. So here you see we have application, data stores, disk, hypervisors, and so forth. I'm going to select internal volume for this. And now is where we can sit or create some of our taxonomy and put the metadata around it so we're alerting against a very specific set of internal volumes. So OCI's annotation capability here, what I'm going to do is use the environment variable here. Why is that? Because I only want to be alerted against production assets. If it's QA, test, dev, or subprod here, I don't want to be alerted on it. It's not going to be deemed critical for me. So I'm going to select that. Next, I'm going to select the Apply After window here. Why is this? I want to reduce the amount of noise. Okay, so if it's a momentary spike, just a little blip on the radar, maybe I want to be alerted for production. But in this case, I'm actually going to state I want a duration of 5 minutes or more, right? So now it has to be sustained latency of at least 5 minutes before I receive a warning or an alert. Next comes our severity. So this is all part of this the flow that we have into ServiceNow. So we were flowing in the critical events into ServiceNow. Maybe I want to receive just an email myself on the warnings before it actually generates a ticket. I can do so by adding my email here. This particular instance, I'm going to set it for critical. That way it sends these into ServiceNow. And now I'm going to set my metrics here. So I want to know what I'm going to be alerted on. So we talked about latency here, Kat. How can we make this a little better?
Right. So I don't want to see just latency, right, because we only care about what's in production, which means it has to be doing some sort of workload. So what I want to see is more of a condition where it's doing some sort of workload but also experience that sort of latency. How can we do that with this performance policy?
So what we can do here is actually set a conditional statement here. And right now it's telling me, and let's choose a number here for IOPS. Let's just say 20 IOPS. Okay, so right now it's alerting me if any one of these conditions are met, it's going to send me an alert or send ServiceNow the alert. Now I'm going to change this to all. And now it's latency and IOPS, both either have to be 20 milliseconds or generating at least 20 IOs before it actually generates the alert. So why is this important? If the volume's not doing anything and no one's using it, probably not an emergency for me to deal with. You know, so just another way to reduce the noise. We're all familiar in the IT world with the ticketing systems and you know, all these alerts being generated. They quickly become ignored, and you're simply just firefighting based on the phone calls. This is a way to reduce those. OCI will capture all of these in our violation dashboard, so you'll see those. If you want to go back and start to do a little bit of cleanup, I would say, and moving things around. But this is one way to simply reduce the noise. And then lastly, we can check the button here at the bottom where it says stop processing further policies if this alert is generated. So if we have multiple policies created for volumes and they're being triggered as well, we already know we need to go look at it, stop processing additional alerts here. We received it. We know we need to investigate. So I'm going to select that here and save. Now, moving forward, we'll receive additional internal volume policy alerts on this particular environment.
So we saw that there's a lot of flexibility around this. We have the ability to do both warnings and criticals. So you can actually think about the warnings as if it was a soft limit, something that you want to go handle proactively before it actually becomes an impact to the business owner or line of businesses or application owners, whoever owns that particular asset. So there's multiple ways of tackling the performance policies so that you can better manage your environment. And that's one of the ways that we showed here that you can start to do that. The other thing that we wanted to showcase was maybe, let's say, the application landing page isn't necessarily something you want to take a look at. There's a lot of noise around it, Don. Maybe there's a certain view that I want to create for myself that only I get to see, or maybe others want to see it as well. But here's what I care about. Maybe in this case here, where we were looking earlier at ECM internal, maybe what I want to do is build my own little view for ECM internal. Is there a way for us to do that?
So we can do this in dashboards, and with dashboards today, they are user-defined. So you can see here inside the dashboards, we have a number of different dashboards that different individuals have created. Actually, here's one from you, Ketsia. So you can create your own dashboards. They are visible to everyone when they log in. If you want a secure type view, you would have to use our BI reporting capabilities, where you can basically set up that multi-tenancy that way where only individuals have access to those views. The dashboards, though, are relatively easy, and that's something I use really to tackle the applications. Why? I love the anomaly detection. It really gives me a view. I should have showed you this really quickly before I started off here. You can alert on the anomalies for applications. So you can see here, if I wanted to get an alert on an anomaly score greater than 40, let's say, it would send me the alert. So this is something also new in 7.3.2 that you could leverage today. So I can get an alert. I don't have to log into the tool. I know there's something I have to look at. But what I would want to do is create a dashboard. So I actually have a couple of dashboards in here, and one for the ECM. I want to show you how that would look. So I basically have a dashboard here created around this ECM internal application with the performance and capacity metrics that I'm interested in. And this is all drag and drop. What you see is what you get. I'm going to go through and edit it. I didn't want to spend the time today actually creating a dashboard. I think it makes more sense to go into some of the details and how we can make this better. So right now, what we're looking at is CPU utilization, memory, IOPS, and latency trends for this ECM application. But there's ways that we can make this a little bit better, right? So I'm going to show you some filtering and variable techniques where you can actually fine-tune or finesse this dashboard a little bit more. So first, I'm going to come in here, and let's take a look at latency. Latency was quite high, so we'll stay with that story here. So I'm actually opening up the widget for this particular dashboard, and I'm looking at virtual machines. I'm looking at max latencies here, and you can see that we have a filter for this ECM application. Now, one thing, if I'm looking at a lot of volumes, this happens to be just an individual virtual machine, I can actually add a filter here. So I'm going to come over here and type in latency, and I'm going to bring in total latency for this example. And now by clicking the any box here, I'm actually able to input a value. So what I'm going to say is only show me latency greater than 30 milliseconds. And what you'll see is that it's actually really going to not change here, but it's only going to show me the latencies on here that are greater than 30. This is one way to actually filter a lot of the noise out just simply by using the filtering capability inside the widgets. We can also create the legends here, right? So you can look at this. And what we're looking at is all right now. I can actually change just the name and break it down by name. So you can see here, we're looking at all the VMs that are associated with this particular ECM application. We're only looking at the VMs that are over 30. This could be 80 milliseconds if you want. I don't think we had anything quite that high. Let's say 45 milliseconds. There we go. And you'll see again that the graph has changed. What's our peak here? Oh, so we do have something that high.
So yeah, you can probably go higher. Yep.
Let me jump a little higher. Let me say 100, okay? Now, oh, why didn't that come in? Wouldn't be a technical demonstration without a technical difficulty. Oh, maybe it's not in the sample period. All right, so let's say with 50 here. So we brought it in here. This is another important factor. When you're talking with a large environment, you may have tens of thousands of volumes that you're dealing with, and they all have some types of latency across them. So really being able to prioritize my time and being able to understand what do I need to investigate first, I use these filters almost religiously to be able to filter out the smaller ones. And let's say you're looking at volumes, maybe I start off with 90 milliseconds. You know, it's at a safe number to begin with. Really, it's helping me prioritize what I need to address first. I'm looking at the criticalities. I can add in, various other details here to filter on. Maybe it is the severity of these particular assets, the criticality. Is it something important? Maybe I want to enter in the environment for this. So where's the environment? Right here. And I only want to look at the production assets here in this particular view. So you can see here I don't have anything in production right now. So let me bring in all of the above, or at least it hasn't been tagged with that. So I can use that to filter down my views and be very prescriptive in what I'm diagnosing, okay? So that's one example here. You can see that we're using trends on here, so it's really helping me understand, the ebbs and flows in this. I'm looking at the last 24 hours. We have the last 3 days, 7 days, 30 days. We can even define a custom period. We can also affix the time here. So if we want to always be looking at the last 24 hours in this particular widget, I can actually deselect this and override that dashboard time. Maybe it makes sense for me to always look at the last 24 hours on a particular view. So a lot of flexibility there.
So Don, I see that there is a lot of flexibility, but I see that these widgets that you're building are filtered down to a specific application, and it looks like it's filtered down for each widget. What if I want to see SAP? Can I just easily just filter everything to that application instead of looking at just ECM?
Sure. So that's a better way of doing it, and quite honestly, that is essentially what I do. Some people prefer, each individual dashboard being specific to a resource or a group of resources. I prefer to use what we call the variable capabilities of the tool. This actual dashboard here, this application dashboard, does just that. So you can see here, we're using a variable. I'll show you how that works. It's actually quite simple. But what they've done here is entered in SAP. I can actually come over here and type in ECM, the application we were just looking at, select this, and you see here all the variables or all the details and metrics have changed around what application I've entered in here. How do you use variables? Well, I'll give you some best practice tips here. First things first, I add the variable to my dashboards first. Do this before you create your widgets. I think it's just a good practice, and quite honestly, it'll make your steps a little easier when you're doing your widgets. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to create another variable. So what we have here is text. That's what I did here. I applied a text variable, and let's just show you what I did. And I came over here, removed the variable name, gave it something more friendly. Let's say application, and I'm going to have to get rid of this guy there before I do that because it's going to tell me it's duplicated. And there we go. So I just created a new variable like this. And right now we're looking at all applications because nothing is specified in this variable. I want to come over here again and type in ECM. There we go. Now, what I'm going to do is create another variable, and I want to do this around a performance number. So remember how we input the filter for latency, and we said just show me something over 40 or 50 milliseconds, and it was hard-coded in our widget. I want to be a little bit more flexible than that and a little bit more dynamic. So what I'm going to do is actually create a number variable here. And I'm going to rename this one, and I'm just going to call it latency. Okay, so I've started off, I created my variables. I called one application, one is latency, and then let's find latency. Here we are. We have a widget here on the side that's trending latencies. I'm going to open or edit that particular widget. And what we can see here now, because I changed things around, I deleted it, so I have to go back here and re-specify. So let me remove that just to show you how that works. I'm going to bring in application because I want my variable to use application. I'm going to select the application variable that I have on my dashboard that I just recreated. Now I'm also going to do another variable filter here. So I'm going to come in here and type in latency, and let's do latency max here. And I'm going to select the variable I created here. And we can also go, and I'll show you why I like to create them first. If I do IOPS, you can see here, I don't have any variable to choose there. So you really want to set up your variables before you add the other metrics in here. So I'm just going to save that here. So right now we're looking at this here, and actually let me change this to latency, instead of latency total, let me change this to latency max, just to be consistent. There we go, and we got some much higher values to look at. Okay, so now I want to say, show me anything over 100 milliseconds. Okay, and what we're doing here is we're going to see the particular volumes. Oh, I didn't break this down by name. I'm going to break this one down by name. I'm going to show you the top 10 here. It could be the top 5, top 3, top 1. Select save here once again. Okay, and now if I back this out, I can type in 200. All right, and you can see now I only have one particular resource here that happens to be an internal volume that is actually exceeding 200. Now I can do this filtering to every one of these widgets here, and all these widgets will change dynamically based on what I'm looking at for a variable. This could be latency, this could be I/O, this could be utilization. That's how I like to create my dashboards. I kind of use this as a knot, kind of pulls the problems up to the surface for me. And again, I'm not necessarily tied to a fixed number or a filter that's been inputted into one of the widgets. So I hope that made sense, Kat. Is there anything you want to add for that?
Yep, so what Don showcased was relatively quickly, relatively easy. He could build a dashboard that looks very presentable, even to management. He didn't have to go into Concrete Cognos to actually go build that report. He may not even have the expertise to actually go and build it. This here is very easy to use. You can try out your own. If you do want to follow a step-by-step guide, please reach out to Joy. She does have the webinar where we did create some custom dashboards. It also has a step-by-step guide as well that you can follow along with.
Perfect. So I think we're about up for time here, Ketsia. I'm going to just bring up a couple of little resources. So just, we talked very quickly about some of the challenges that IT administrators face with the disparate tools, the silos, kind of trying to find that needle in the haystack. Hopefully we demonstrated some ways to use OCI. We showed you the ServiceNow example and how to drive some of that data into the business and be able to be a little bit more proactive with your approaches in trying to utilize OCI, whether it be anomaly detection, dashboards, and filters and variables. I'm also going to provide you some links to some resources. So if you want to go take a look at our OnCommand Insight homepage, it's very simple. It's www.netup.com/OCI. Check out our Doc Center at docs.netup.com. There's a lot of new detail there, walkthroughs, how-tos, and so forth. We also have the latest release notes available for 7.3.2. And I also provide you some other, I would say, supportive webinars that have happened in the past around some of the detail that we talked about today. And then lastly is our YouTube channel. There's the OnCommand YouTube channel. I provided a link here where there's a number of different videos and resources that you can view. And then I'll put a little self-promotion out here. If you want to find out more from us, please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. You got both Ketsia and myself. Here's our contact information if you have additional questions we don't get to. And then I'll open it up now, Ketsia, for any questions in the audience. I know you've been monitoring the chat window.
Yeah, it looks like we didn't get too many questions today. But if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You have our contact information. You also have the Customer Success Group's contact information as well. Reach out to your CSM if you have any additional questions. Maybe you didn't get a chance to actually join here and you're actually just watching a recording. We are always open to answering any of your questions at any time. So for the next web series, what we're planning on doing is today we looked at the IT administrator. What we're looking at doing next is the capacity planner. How do you use OCI from a capacity planning standpoint so that you can start to justify when and why you need to buy more storage. Thanks to everybody for joining. We'll stay on the call for about another 7 minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to take yourself off mute, and you can ask a question here as well. At the same time, if you want to just ask a question in chat, we're here to look at the chat and monitor for a couple of more minutes as well.
And at this time, I'm going to stop the recording, but I will keep the WebEx open in case anyone had any more questions.
Thank you, Joy, and thank you for your help today in today's presentation. And folks, if you have questions, feel free, shout it out there into the chat window. If you'd like to hear more about a particular topic in more depth, please let us know. I think this is a pretty good high-level overview of how I at least use OCI to get started. And hopefully it was informative for you today.